Your second brain could be ruining your memory. To understand why and the ramifications this has in the information age, we must take a journey through the history of note-taking. Before note-taking, our ancestors used oral storytelling to pass on knowledge. To survive, they needed a detailed mental map of their territory and the organisms which inhabited it. New knowledge took time to ingrain because thoughts are fleeting and there was no way to externalize them. Instead, memory was the primary form of knowledge storage. Oral storytellers ingrained information through mnemonic techniques like alliteration, repetition, assonance, and proverbial sayings. This changed with the advent of note-taking from the phonetic alphabet, letters and symbols directly corresponding to speech sounds. Boom! Ancient second brains were born. For the first time ever, we could externalize our thoughts, examine them, and look at them anew every day. This was revolutionary because thinking could compound on itself. We started asking questions like, what is beauty and how does one live ethically? People could write down laws and edicts, bringing order on a mass scale. Trade sparked as currency and numerical note-taking made transactions easier. Informational centers like the Great Library of Alexandria were built for the ever-growing knowledge of civilization. But there was a problem with these early methods. They took loads of friction to use. Early note-taking required wood, stone, and other difficult-to-use mediums. These note-taking techniques were time-intensive and costly. Over time, humans found new mediums like papyrus, paper, and the telegram to reduce friction for sending and taking notes. But even these mediums had flaws, as anyone who has used a typewriter compared to a keyboard can confess. So we reduced friction even more. Now, the internet gives access to the notes of the entire human collective with a few clicks of a button. And even more recently, new digital note-taking technologies like Roam Research, Evernote, Notion, and Obsidian are again changing the note-taking landscape. This is fantastic in so many ways. I no longer have to remember the names of my favorite restaurants and travel spots. Google Maps does it for me with this location saving feature. It's become common jargon if you don't know something to Google it and find the answer in 5 seconds. Unlike my parents, I can keep phone numbers in stored contacts instead of memorizing them by heart. Modern humans are free to foster memory for what matters most to them. Unfortunately, this progression in our note-taking capabilities has a dark side. Even in the early stages of note-taking, some people voiced their ambivalences. Plato warned it was an invention that will produce forgetfulness in the minds of those who learn to use it, because they will not practice their memory. Their trust in writing, produced by external characters which are no part of themselves, will discourage the use of their own memory within them. If Plato was ambivalent about note-taking in the 400s and 300s BCE, he would be shocked at the state of note-taking today. It's all because of one word: friction. For most of history, note-taking was hard. Stone and wood were obnoxiously slow and difficult to carve in. In addition, many people weren't literate, meaning scribes, professions whose sole job was to take notes, were required. This created lots of friction in taking notes. Most people didn't externalize thoughts in writing, and memory remained the primary form of knowledge storage for thousands of years. But today, the friction in taking notes is practically non-existent. Clicking a button, I can open a new Apple Note on my phone and write whatever comes to mind. A quick Google search shows me the answers to almost anything in 5 seconds. I can highlight passages on Kindle with the click of a button. What do we take notes on when there's no friction? The answer, it seems, is everything. Modern humans are slaves to their notes. I myself am guilty. My digital device holds all of my tasks, calendar events, my second brain, and a bunch of other random stuff you don't even want to know. If I lost access to my phone and laptop tomorrow, I would be screwed. Offloading our memory has become much too easy. As a result, note-taking becomes a process of forgetting information by externalizing it in notes. Scientifically, this makes sense. In Supersizing the Mind, the Science of Cognitive Extension, Andy Clark argues our minds utilize the external landscape to save energy by keeping things out of memory. All else being equal, the brain prefers external sources because they take no energy to maintain. This is the problem of note-taking without friction. Forgetting becomes an addiction because it saves your brain the energy of storing things in long-term memory. And because there's no friction, there's a possibility for taking notes on everything. It's awe-striking to have conversations with some teens, a group particularly affected by modern technology, and get slapped in the face with their lousy memory. A few days ago, a relative of mine talked about a book we had both read called Sapiens. They had finished the book last week and loved it. When I asked about their favorite takeaways, however, they could barely recall a few sparse ideas. I can't remember. They likely highlighted as their primary form of note-taking and did nothing further to engage with the material. While I read it 3 months ago, I recalled more because I made a book summary on it. I engaged much more deeply with the material. If we want to learn how to effectively foster memory in our first brains once again, we can take insight from note-taking history. As discussed earlier, before note-taking, knowledge was transferred orally, often through storytelling. They ingrained this knowledge by using an ancient yet underused process. Thinking. Thinking births memory. Through thinking, we connect new information to past knowledge, organize it amongst related ideas, develop those ideas, and come up with new knowledge. Thinking fosters memory through two fundamental processes: active recall and spaced repetition. Active recall involves bringing information to mind without having it in front of you. Spaced repetition is doing so over repeatedly expanding intervals of time. But as you now know, note-taking isn't a form of active recall. It's more accurately a form of forgetting. I believe this is one reason why many people's memory is so bad in modern society. Instead of fostering memory through thinking, people resort to forgetting through note-taking, or even worse, disregard both thinking and note-taking altogether. But there's another major reason thinking has been disrupted: distraction. In the information age, we are bombarded with so much informational garbage, most people struggle to find 30 minutes for thinking in a day. Billboard advertisements, texting, color television, unlimited music, Spotify, and so much more. Compare this to the more solitary and distraction-free lifestyle of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, and it's easy to see how they had more time for thinking. Interestingly, we can see the positive effects of thinking on memory in one particular societal group. For example, people with dyslexia often have incredible long-term memories. I can't prove it scientifically, but I believe one reason is they find it hard to take notes. Instead, they must spend more time thinking inside of their first brains, facilitating memory through active recall and spaced repetition. Now we can finally answer the question of how your second brain could be making you forgetful. The reasoning comes back to friction. Second brainers use many tools to make note-taking as seamless as possible. Article highlighters like Instapaper, podcast highlighters like Air, web clickers, conversation transcribers like Otter.io, image scanners, and many more apps all reduce the friction of note-taking. Many second brainers also learn keyboard shortcuts for saving information, allowing them to highlight information with an unrelenting fervor. As you now know, this relentless note-taking makes you forgetful. Forgetting information through externalization becomes an addiction. It takes away the need to foster memory. But it also has a second ramification. When you capture everything, you capture nothing. So many things seem life-changing when you first read them. It's only after our first brain has some time to process that you realize the information isn't that substantial. Finally, seamless note-taking has a third issue for second brainers. Their second brain becomes so cluttered, they are forced to spend all their time organizing. Their knowledge management system becomes an endless cycle of capture and organization. This leaves no time for thinking, killing their ability to come up with creative solutions to problems. I'm not saying all second brainers do this, but with the capabilities of modern knowledge tools, it can be a trap too easy to fall for. What's the solution? I propose a solution put forth by a few select people in the second brain community, most notably Nick Milo. We need to note make rather than note take. What's the difference? Note-taking, broadly defined, is the externalizing of others' ideas into the physical world. Note-making, however, is the process of externalizing notes in our own words. The difference can be summed up by this simple equation: note-taking plus thinking plus friction equals note-making plus memory. This equation considers everything we've learned from the history of note-taking. It adds friction to note-taking to ensure we capture only the most important ideas, and it adds thinking to make sure these ideas are insightful and unique. As a result, we make notes in our own words and come out with valuable memory in our first brains. How do we implement this into our system? First, figure out what medium of information you use most for your second brain. Is it Kindle books? Is it podcasts? Is it something else? Then purposely make it harder to capture information from other mediums. I get most of my information from Kindle books, articles, and podcasts. I make capturing on every other medium harder. For example, on Twitter, I only allow myself to capture through copying and pasting. When I could save them with a single click, I practically captured every thread I came across. Even in mediums you value most, add friction to capturing. I force myself to make some type of annotation for almost every highlight I take. This stops me from mindless highlighting of the entire book many people are prone to. Don't capture shoulds. Instead, capture information that sparks joy. In other words, capture what resonates with you. Does seeing a piece of information make your heart beat faster? Do your eyes dilate? Does a light bulb go up in your head? Only then capture it. In addition to adding friction, make time for thinking. Slowly decrease your exposure to distractions of modern day society. Stop checking your phone 41 times a day. Don't watch Netflix alone. Reduce the time you spend on social media. At the same time, schedule time in for thinking. I walk for an hour in nature every day, critically, without listening to music or a podcast. This is where I get some of my best insights into future blog posts, videos, and newsletters. If this is too much for you, try 10 minutes. Anything is better than nothing. If you implement these suggestions, your second brain will become a beautiful balance of other people's ideas mixed with your own insights. And you will be less forgetful. Thinking will facilitate long-term memory through active recall and spaced repetition. Your conversations will become magical. People will be stunned by your ability to recall vast amounts of information at the top of your head. They might even become curious about building their own second brains if they haven't already. Being a second brainer myself, I believe it's the second brain community's responsibility to show the rest of society how to manage knowledge effectively. If we want to stay worthy of this status, we have to learn from note-taking history. We need to prioritize note-making. Only then can we hope to convince others to remodel their relationship to information. Be sure to check out my video on how to sabotage your knowledge management workflow in 8 steps to learn more about what might be hurting your ability to practice PKM. As always, have a fantastic rest of your day, and bye-bye.